When we talk about the problem of Islam and terrorism, or Islamism as some people call it, we should look at the phenomena of radical Islam as a parasitic cancer. It is a parasite because it grows on the blood of the host nation, sucks its nutrition, uses its values of liberty until it destroys it. And it is cancer because it grows asymptomatic or without symptoms, and the moment it starts to manifest, it could be very late for any civilized society to deal with it. The problem of Islamism or radical Islam is that it can attack us at two levels or two fronts. The first front is the terrorism itself, as we have seen in September the 11th, in attacks on London, Madrid train bombing, Bali attacks, attacks in Russia, Beslan, and the numerous terrorist attacks all over the world. This is one tactic of Islamism. The other tactic is to destroy the values of liberty and using the values of liberty itself to destroy it. It's a gradual process that we will not notice here until it happens. And we can get example from Europe. Now it is happening and people are getting into real trouble now because of the increasing number of people who believe in radical Islamic views. And also in Egypt, in Lebanon, in many other countries, when Islamists start to increase in number, we get nothing but problems. And we all need to realize that once this form of Islam controls any society, we will live simply in a Taliban-like system. So if you should ask yourself one question when we talk about Sharia laws, do I want to live in a Taliban-like system? Do I want to live in a system that kills freedom and liberty? Do I want to live in a system that suppress women and kill gays and declare jihad and wars on non-Muslims just for being non-Muslims? That is the question here that we need to ask ourselves. The phenomena of Islam or radical Islam, I want to be more specific here, has to be defined, because in any war, if you don't define your enemy clearly, you will lose the war. It's virtually impossible to win this war. While we are talking about radical Islam and moderate Islam in a relative term, people can talk forever about this terminology. If we don't define what do we mean by radical Islam, we will lose this war. So my vision here and my message here is that, number one, we have to define what do we mean by radical Islam. And I put a simple definition in my book, Inside Jihad, and I put it in a sort of test called RIST, or Radical Islam Support Test. It's simple alphabetics to remember: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, killing apostate, or apostate I mean, killing apostates. B, beating women and stoning them to death. C, calling Jews pigs and monkeys. D, declaring wars on non-Muslims to subjugate them to Islam or force them to pay jizya, a humiliating tax. E, enslavement of female war prisoners and raping them, as what we see in Darfur happening right now. F, fighting Jews before end days and killing all of them, which is the major obstacle to having peace now in the Middle East. G, killing gays. These are the definitions of radical Islam. This is what we need to fight. It's not just a word called radical Islam. It should have parameters and definitions. Otherwise, discussions and arguments will be endless. So number one step in this war is to define what is the enemy and who is the enemy exactly. It may not be the Muslims themselves. The Muslims are victims of radical Islam. But certainly, we deal with an ideology that has to be defeated. When we deal with this phenomena of radical Islam, we have to understand that the integration of different powers is vital to make us successful in this war. It's like chess game. You cannot use one piece and win the game. You have to use more than one piece. In this situation, I can tell that offering a new interpretation or understanding for Islamic texts can help young Muslims to understand the religion in a different way. Also, heavy criticism on Islam and radical Islamic teaching can be very useful because it will force people to adopt new interpretations. Without this form of pressure, Muslims will never feel the need to adopt any different forms of interpretations. Decreasing the appeasement for radical Islam is vital also to win this war, because as long as people are telling Muslims that there is no problems in the teaching at all, then they will never ever think to adopt different forms of interpretations. So the appeasement can cause major trouble. In fact, it's impeding reformation of Islam. The liberal left style of appeasing radical Muslims actually has impeded the process of reformation in Islam and preventing Islam from getting a theologically based peaceful interpretations. The third thing, which is very specialized, is the sense of defeat that can happen in the mindset and the mind of Islamists. It's vital to give the enemy a sense of defeat or a feel of defeat. Otherwise, you can't change it. We couldn't change the Nazi ideology or the ideology of the Emperor of Japan without defeating them first. The initial defeat facilitated the process of reformation, facilitated the process of re-education. Without this form of defeat, the free world wouldn't have been capable of changing the Nazi ideology or the ideology of the Japanese after World War II. These are probably the general features here, and may give one example of what I mean by new interpretations for Islam. And I can give personal example of myself. When I was young in a terrorist Islamic organization with Dr. Ayman al-Zawahri, I was reading a verse in the Quran that tells me فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُم, which means kill the infidels wherever you find them. And as a child, I felt that I asked myself, shall I go and kill my neighbor because she is a Christian? I was in real worry, and I went to ask one of the radical Muslims or the Salafists. He said to me, we have to fight all the infidels. It is a religious duty. I didn't feel that it was a reasonable answer for me. So I went to ask a Sufi scholar. He said to me, no, my son, you have to be very peaceful. And I said to him, but it is written in the Quran. He said to me, my son, in the day of judgment, you will understand the meaning of this verse. And again, I was not satisfied. Secular people couldn't give me an answer. Later on, I discovered in life that the word that the Quran used was فَاقْتُلُوا al-mushrikeen. Al means the in language. When you use the suffix the, it can specify the meaning only in this period of time and the place during the early period of Islam. If someone taught this to me when I was young, if someone changed the interpretation of the text so that I can understand the religion in a peaceful way, I wouldn't have thought to continue in the process of terrorism or jihadism.